Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU, the podcast. Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak. This is MotivationU, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, right here inside the Coach's Podcast Room. Celebration Point, Gainesville, Florida. Exit 384 off of I-75. Just get off. If you're coming north, turn left. If you're coming south, turn right. Come to Celebration Point. Incredible. And the museum, the restaurant is absolutely wonderful. A lot of Dale Carnegie things starting soon. We have a Jacksonville class starting next Thursday, a week from today, the 10th. You can sign up for that. Little tidbit to our guest today, because that program takes place at his facility. So we'll share that a little bit later. And then also in Gainesville, Lake City, Valdosta, Tallahassee, we have a leadership training for managers starting in Jacksonville in September. November, put it on your calendar, we're going to have a leadership retreat in Jacksonville, which will be a 2-day leadership retreat that'll highlight the high-impact presentation program from Dale Carnegie and a lot of socializing. Now, there's a limited number of seats for that. So when you see that on the website, please grab it. And that website is jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. Go to find a class, click on that button, and it'll take you to what you want. So I am so excited about this today because I get to meet people who become friends on this program. I get to know them, talk to them, understand them. But there are those occasions when one of your friends walks in to be on the program, and you're already friends. And my friend is Bill Barnett of the World Financial Group. Bill, welcome.
Thank you.
To this program.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Thank you up front for working with us in the Dale Carnegie classes in Jacksonville.
It's something obviously I believed in for a very long time, so it's nice to be able to give something back to kind of help a lot of those other folks that come through. So
yes.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that.
Bill and I met in an interesting way. His significant other, he and her boss, kind of on a motorcycle ride, if I remember correctly, right, convinced her to take a Dale Carnegie class.
Kind of set her up. That's absolutely.
And
right.
And that's how Bill and I met, and we've been friends ever since. Now, I will tell you, I tell the story of Laura very many times in class because she is that one person in session 2 that I was looking out the window going, is she getting her in car and going home? And she was.
Right.
So I ran outside, brought her back in, and long story short, which I hate that terminology, but she has been a graduate assistant for us multitude of times.
Yep.
And has just advanced her public speaking to the point where I think she even got involved in some type of comedy.
Yes, because of the way we set her up, right? Well, you weren't involved in that, but her boss at the time, this is now 11, 12 years ago,
yeah.
I guess it's been a while. I understood that she needed to go through that class, right? And she was in a management role, but didn't understand the leadership part that went with management, sorry, to be a good one, right? Mm-hmm. And I understood she needed to do that. So she had a new boss who was like the head of her big region or whatever, right? And he was a Harley guy, and he and I kind of crossed paths a little bit on that. So I called him, and I explained to him, and he turned out he was a graduate. And he was like, "Oh, you know what? You're exactly right. That would be the perfect thing for her." because we're going to be expanding. Her role is going to be expanding, and that will help her from being overwhelmed. And so I explained to him there wasn't anything she wanted to do, that I had a little argument with her over it, and it didn't go well. And so we agreed that what we would do is accidentally meet on a Sunday afternoon
at a restaurant at a certain time,
and lo and behold, we would be there going to have lunch, and he would just come up and be like, "Oh wow, you should sit with us." And so it was a casual Sunday afternoon, a little chit chat, and I said to him then, "Hey, by the way, I explained to her that I thought that she should do this." And he went, "Oh, I'm a graduate." And we had this all worked out, how good that would be. And he said, "You know what, as a matter of fact, we should work this thing out. I'll put that into our budget." And he went on his phone. He said, "Look, there's a class 2 weeks from now. Let's register you now," right? So that was how it started. And you're exactly right. After the first or second class, it was not her intent to go back. I mean, she left at halftime, so to speak, considering the setting, right?
Right before their first talk.
And fortunately, you caught her. And she is sort of the poster child for what you proclaim the program to be, about being life-changing, the direction in it, how to handle things, and it was extraordinarily uncomfortable for her. But she applied it, and then decided that she really didn't get enough out of the first one, and then did their graduate assistant program over and over
again.
And now does her own training programs, does things in front, does her own. Lots of things, involved their own organization and whatever. So it's definitely the springboard for that was absolutely the moment that you kept her from leaving.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and a wonderful person. I have to commend you for continuing an incredible relationship after that setup. That's leadership.
It might have been
also
stressful at a time or two.
So where did the world start for Bill Barnett? Where did you grow up?
West Virginia, right? So where I grew up, Bob, was in that place in West Virginia, like when you see the coal mine fall in or a train crash, and you watch on the news and you look at this little teeny tiny place in the mountain, and you say to yourself, who would live there, right? And that was where I grew up, right? Is in that place. Right?
What was the name of the town?
Colliers, actually, which a collier is a coal miner, right? Okay. That's actually what that word stands for.
So was your family in coal mining?
No, not at all.
So at least you're honest about it.
Yeah.
President isn't always
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. My dad worked in a steel mill, and he was a diesel electrician, right? And so like most people think trains work off the diesel engine. It doesn't. The diesel engine turns electric generators that actually make the locomotives move. His job was to rebuild those electric motors and all that kind of stuff. So he was a World War II guy and all that sort of thing, and came out, went to work in the steel mill. And so that was his. So we had a little farm, right? We lived out in the country pretty good. And so he worked in the steel mill. We had a little farm. And my mom was kind of, the non-work, always wore house dresses, right?
I got you.
Little string of pearl kind of thing, right? Out in the middle of nowhere. So that was, it was pretty, growing up was very much with, a strong parental background, and they liked each other a lot, right? So that helped, right? And they went through financial stresses and everything else that goes along with with all that. But and I have an older sister. She's 11 years older than I am. So you can kind of get the idea, the gap in the mountains in 11 years. I was a surprise to the family. So my parents were a little older when I was born. So so that was it. And we had a 2-bedroom, 850 square foot house, right? My little tiny bed was in my parents' room until my sister graduated high school, and then I got her room. Wow. So yeah, so there wasn't anything about her I liked. I couldn't wait to get her out. Right? Not really, but so anyway, that was how it was.
That's interesting. Now, what were the work ethic, of course, that you have, because Bill has an incredible work ethic. I mean, the man will outwork anybody. Doesn't matter what's going on. If it's flooding at his house, that he's moving bags around, or just working, right?
Right.
You don't mind it. So the work ethic kind of probably come from what you
Yeah, it's
grew up
choiceless
with.
when you grow up like
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? You know, it's not a matter of, gee, I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
You know, you have assigned tasks, right? And those tasks are very clearly yours. And in my house, whatever that task was, you were going to meet. Though actually, the way my dad did it, and my dad was awesome. I mean, just both of my parents, right? I love the fact that I grew up in the house I did with the parents that I had. But that said, my dad was truly like a World War II hero, like cover of Life magazine kind of things, right? And just unbelievable things, right, that he did. So that also means he was tough, right? I mean, his BS meter started at a negative number, and you didn't get past that, right? You know, just that was that.
Nothing,
right? You know, there was not going to cross that line, right? There was an expectation, and you understood you were going to meet it, and if you didn't meet it, there were consequences for not meeting it, and that was that. So, for instance, right, when I was 6, my responsibility was to get the mail. Right? Well, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you live out in the country and your mailbox is 1.5 miles away down a mountain, it's a process, right? And that was my daily chore, right? I feel there are little things, but that was like the one that everybody counted on. My job was to get that. And in the winter in the mountains in West Virginia, again, there's a lot to that, right?
Preparation.
So. Yeah, it's not going to the corner and open the key, right? It doesn't work like that. So on those rare occasions that I did not meet my responsibility, the way my dad handled it was we sat down for dinner, and we were going to give blessings, grace, right, for that dinner. Thanks for that dinner, and as soon as that was over, my dad, who had huge hands, would put his hand over my plate, and he would say, "Not you." And at the instant that he would say, "Not you," I understood right then that meant I forgot the mail, right? And so at that moment, right, even if it was when we ate at 5 o'clock, not 5:01 and not 4:59, my dad would get home, and that was the deal, right? So that meant that it was pretty dusk, right, in the mountains. And so that meant you put your coat on and your boots on, and you would walk down that hill, which was scary in the winter, right, and back, and then I could eat, and whatever it was that was on my plate, I ate then. So if it was cold, that was it, and there was no adjusting.
There was no microwaves back then.
No, wasn't any of that. This was what it was. And my mom was pretty gooey, so she didn't really like that, but she also understood what he was trying to teach me. Right, and
I like that word, pretty gooey.
She was very gooey, right? Yeah, I mean, very, very gooey, right? And what you want your mom to be, right? And so she was definitely that, and so my dad would kind of have to sort of step in. It was like, look, we're not teaching him anything. If there's not a price paid, then you didn't teach him anything. Yeah. So that was kind of how it started. So, and then that just went on through time with everything. I mean, if I got assigned a responsibility, then I had to meet that responsibility.
Now you've always been in like leadership roles. Where did you form your leadership process along the way? Who had an influence on that in your life as you were growing up?
Well, obviously my father, right, and by far and away. My dad told me something, Bob, and this is kind of where I guess it started, and it probably didn't resonate until I was a little bit older of how important it was that he told me. But, my dad would like to have been entrepreneurial, right? He tried kind of, in the beginning of some of the multi-level marketing things or whatever, right? And he would like to have been able to figure that out. And my mom died when I was 21, and so she was really ill for about 5 years, and so that was pretty all-encompassing, and that limited what he could do. But it was in him. He just was never able to allow it to be out, right? And because he had a family to take care of, he worked in the mill and he did what he did, right, to be able to do that. But that said, when I was about probably 17, maybe almost 18, I was probably senior in high school, I guess, and And I clearly had that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because I liked figuring things out and being able to make money in a lot of different ways. Like, I've always been somebody that understands how to generate money, right? Even as little, right? 12, 13, 14 years old, even in the country, I figured out how to do things. I always had more money than the people around me, right? And it wasn't because I wanted the money, it was that I liked figuring out the challenge of how to get it, right? That was more it. And so my dad recognized that, and I'd done a couple of kind of little bigger things at that point. So he told me, he said, Bill, here's the thing that you have to understand. I think that I've given you a really good example of being a good husband, right? And he was, right? And he said, I'm real proud of that. And he said, I think I've given you a really good example of being a Christian, right? And living your life with that dedication. And he did, right? And he said, and I've done my best to be a good father, right? And he said, that doesn't come with a manual, right? And it was funny. He said, Christianity comes with a manual. That's kind of easy to follow, right?
Yeah.
And he said, and that tells you how to be a good husband. And he said, but the fatherhood doesn't exactly do that. And he said, you've given me a lot of twists along the way. Stories for a different day. I mean, I gave him a run for his money, right? And he said, so I've given you what I can. But I can't give you anything more than that. For what it is that you're going to want to go and do in your life, I don't have any experience. There's nothing I can do to help you with that. So I'm done. And now what you have to do is start finding people that have accomplished what you want, even if they failed at it, because you learn more from the people that failed than you ever will from the people that did it. So don't hesitate to work with either one of them. Learn from why did the person do what they did that it didn't work. Then watch the ones that it did work and figure out where the piece in the middle is that belongs to you. And I can remember that conversation incredibly, right? So that was kind of the first step, right? Because that really resonated with me. So then when I moved to the Washington, D.C. area, right, to go to school. And that was because my sister at that
George
point,
Mason?
George Mason, right, yeah, George Mason University. And that was because my sister lived in the D.C. area and she worked for the FBI, and her husband had been killed in a car crash, so she was kind of by herself at that point. So she had me come and live with her, and I didn't really know her because it was 11 years difference, right? So yeah, it wasn't like it was different, right? So anyway, so I went to school and I lived with her and worked, and I paid her to live there and all that sort of thing, right? And I understood I needed to find somebody that started looking for those people. I found a little bit about that in the church that I went to, right? I'm an Episcopalian, went to that. And I looked for some of the business people there, right? And kind of, you tried to ask them questions, and that was a little bit. And because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, was more it than anything else. I understood that I wanted to be in business of some kind. I just didn't understand what that was. So I knew I had to expose it. And so after a little while, and I was doing entrepreneurial things. I mean, I had contracts for townhouse developments that I went and did all the grass and the yard work and that, and I built fireplaces for people and all kinds of things along that line. So it was all at the end of my own two hands kind of things. But it generated a lot more money than having a job, right? And so I did that. And then I was in Georgetown one day, and this was kind of where that switch flipped, I think, right? I was in Georgetown, D.C., right? And that was to, go have some fun and, meet a girl and dance and all that kind of stuff, right? Some of the clubs. And I walked past this men's store that was a really expensive men's store. And I looked in the window of that thing, and I was looking at the prices. And these are, this is 45 years ago now or more. And they were $800 to $1,200 or $1,400 then, right? Wow. So these are $4,000 Armani suits today, right? So I'm looking at that in the window, and it clicked to me that and the store was big and had a lot of stuff in it, right? Really nice, real fancy. And I thought, if I can figure out how the people that can afford to pay for that pay for it, that's the link. That's what I need. So for 6 months, I went in every other week and talked to the owner and asked him to give me a job, which he would not do because I didn't fit. I was 20 years old, 19 or 20, whatever it was. And he didn't hire college students, you know. I mean, he hired tailors, right? These were, you know, the guy that ran the store had been a tailor on Savile Row in London, right? You know, they didn't have college kids giving you a tie, right? It didn't work that way. So I didn't fit. But my persistency, I mean, it was every 2 weeks. And finally, after a little while, he looked at me and he said, geez, Bill. I mean, he appreciated it. And he said, you know what? We're going to be opening another store, and I'm going to need somebody that runs everything between it. If you take the job doing that, because we're going to have a van and you're going to be running things from a warehouse, we're going to bring it in, at least it'll give you an opportunity to be around it. Because I explained to him what I wanted, right? I wanted to meet people that could afford his suits, right? So I wasn't like looking for a job. I explained to him I had a clear purpose, right? And so he let me do it. And I did that then for about, I guess, almost a year and a half. And every time, and eventually he moved me into a store because I learned everything, right? I'm a reader. Everything that would come through that warehouse, every salesperson that was in there giving him a presentation, everything. I read it all until I knew everything there was to know about all the different kind of suits and how they're cut and where they're tailored and perspiration pads and you name it, I knew it. And he finally let me do the retail side, and that gave me the chance to start talking to somebody.
That's incredible.
That got me into the financial business, which is in the end what I found fit me. Because I understood I didn't want to be a doctor. With no offense to the attorneys out there, right? As a 20-year-old, we'd have attorneys that mostly were lobbyists in Georgetown, right? And they made a boatload of money, and they were very arrogant. So, you know, when I would start to ask them about their career stuff, they would say, listen, I want the red silk tie kid, and that would be that, right? It was clear they did not want to talk to me, right? And that led me to believe I don't want to be 50 years old and not be a nice guy, right? Because that's how I saw that, right? So I knew that I wanted to do something that was nice. So that was kind of how it all came about.
Type of situations.
Oh, yeah.
And how they impact us.
Right.
You know,
falsely, there's plenty of nice attorneys or whatever. Right? In this case, that was kind of false, but it did steer me away from that profession as a result of the ones that I met. Right.
We're talking business leadership, finance, life with Bill Barnett of the World Financial Group in Jacksonville, Florida, and Bill's sharing some of the ideas of how he shaped his thoughts. How would you describe your leadership style?
I think, you know, I think most good leaders have to do it by example, right?
Your leadership style.
Well, because I understand that pretty much all leaders start with have to do it by example, right?
Okay.
I think most of the people that you're going to lead at some point, they have to understand that you have a very clear-cut, communicable message to them about what it is you're trying to accomplish, and that you have a method to accomplish that.
So that
I
vision
think that's first.
You really start with a clear vision.
I believe that's really important. That, you know, I don't have to do the job every day. I mean, I have a couple of different businesses now, and you know, I couldn't function at pretty much any of the jobs in the businesses that I own, right? You know, if somebody called and said, hey, can you get this for me? I would have no idea how to do it, right? So it's not necessarily that you have to, when I say leadership and do it, it's not necessarily you have to perform the task, but they have to understand that you understand the task, right? And you've somehow participated in how they see it, right? So I believe first and foremost is the vision of the accomplishment, right? What is it you're actually trying to do so that they have an opportunity to decide if they want to participate in that path or not, right? And so if that person feels comfortable with the path that you want to set for them, whatever that objective is corporately, right? Then the second part of it, I think, for me anyway, with leadership, is I really work at being a very empathetic person, right? I'm very conscientious about that, and very thoughtful, very conscientious about the folks that work with me, right? Of getting to know who they are and what it is that they want to achieve, right? Because, they don't want to do what I did, right? They don't want to pay the price or take the risks or do the things. And I understand that, right? That's okay. And I'm not going to, I don't want to shun them or in some way just because they don't necessarily want to accomplish the same thing I did, right?
Correct.
So it's first being able to, I think, understand who they are, what they want, the direction that they're trying to go in, what do they want in their life, and then saying to myself, can I help them achieve that, right? Are they in the right place to be able to achieve what it is that they want to be able to achieve, right? And if the answer to that is yes, and they have a clear message, and they believe in the message, and they believe that I have the skill to get them there, then I think that's first. And then it makes the leadership part a lot easier because they'll follow you, right, at that point. So
the vision, the empathy, that's...
For me, that works, right? I'm not a good manager, right? And I don't even like the word, actually, right?
The process side of it.
Yeah, I don't like that. The management side is an individual task, right? So in my mind. So when somebody says, it's all about management, right? I don't see that, right? That's not, that doesn't end.
Too often we blend those two things, leadership and management, together.
Absolutely, and they're not.
Process versus people driven.
Right. Yeah, leadership is truly about getting an individual to do something that they would like to do, but they really didn't believe that they could until you showed them that they can and that you're willing to be right there with them, pulling them along the way.
Yeah, and pulling is the right thing.
Yeah, not pushing.
That was a vision that one of my first bosses, Bill Pacelli, ever showed me, is that if you're going to get somebody to the mountaintop, you got to pull them to the top.
Right.
And in order for you to get them there, you're going to get there first.
Right.
But your whole focus is on helping them.
Yeah.
The minute you look up to see where the peak is, you both go tumbling down the hill.
I had every time I could sign up as I was trying to build my career, I lived in Virginia Beach for a while and then San Diego. And any of the community college classes that had anything to do with management or leadership, I was taking.
Right next door to each other.
Yeah, right. And the day-long classes, right? I love those where you sign up for the one-day seminar thing, right? And at all those community classes and stuff. And I did all of them. If there was anything that had to do with management, leadership, coordination of logistics, right? I would sign up for it, right? Mm-hmm. The one-day programs, right? Did all of them. And one of them that was that I thought was probably one of the more graphic examples was right after I moved to San Diego, and that was the first time I was building something big, right? And it was pretty intense every day. And this guy took a spaghetti noodle. And it was a guy who was full-time at a whole other job, and he was just there for the one-day class to teach leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And he took a one spaghetti noodle, right? And he put it on the table, and he said, our task is to get it to the other side. And everybody kind of looked at it for a minute, and he said, and we have two choices, push it or pull it, right? And that visual example, and again, that's been a long time ago, obviously, that visual example I've never forgotten. And when I start to deal with somebody and I'm thinking about it and I'm being as empathetic as I can be, my visual for that is always, how do I get that cooked noodle across the table, right? It's up to me to get them to see the other side and to bring them with me. So, I think, when you talk about who are those examples of the how you got there, right? I had the very first person that I worked for professionally in the financial field was a guy named Pete Giordano, and he was by far and away my first prime mentor, right? I had other people that gave me things, but Pete absolutely was my first true recognizable mentor, right? And Pete was the guy, again, because I'm a push the limit person, I get all over the place sometimes, right? And I'm a color out of the line person, right? And so occasionally I have to have somebody bring me back in, right? That I went too far.
Hold that thought up, Pete. Okay. Because we've got to take a commercial.
I got you, right.
For a second, right? Right. We're talking with Bill Barnett about leadership, business, and we're going to tackle a couple of great topics topics coming back, the Alhambra Theater,
Right.
World Financial Group, your seafood restaurant, all of the things that you have done along the way, and I want to tackle those.
Okay, we can do it.
We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill here inside the Coaches Podcast Room. This is Motivation U, the podcast.
Hi there, this is head ball coach Steve Spurrier, and I'm here with my wife Jerry and our good friend Sherry Houston, the executive director of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of North Central Florida. We're thrilled to announce that the 2-year anniversary of our restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, is coming up on August 14th. Last year we had so much fun celebrating with everybody that we're doing it bigger and better this year. We're hosting a special dinner and celebration that will include a chef's choice of premium buffet or your favorite Spurrier Gridiron Grill menu, including a filet mignon carving station, shrimp and grits, short rib risotto, wonderful seafood options, and many dessert options also.
Like my famous chocolate chip cookies.
Proceeds being donated to the local Ronald McDonald House.
Thrilled to once again partner with Coach Jerry and the Spurrier Gridiron team to raise funds for the Ronald McDonald House, benefiting families and children experiencing medical emergencies.
Spurrier's Gridiron Grill would be donating 11% of all of our money from food and 66% of drink sales to the Ronald McDonald House.
Go to spurriers.com right now and reserve a ticket before they sell out.
We'll have wonderful food, special guests, and a limited edition of the 2nd-year anniversary collector's coins, as well as prizes like a dinner with me and Jerry. We couldn't have become one of the busiest and most successful restaurants in the Southeast without your support. So we want to celebrate with the most important people of our team, and that's you.
I want to celebrate with some of those cookies. Do you have any of those?
Sure do. Right here for you.
Oh, thank you.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Jeffrey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm joining the band, of course. Since Meldon Law is the official law firm partner of the Florida Gators, I want to help.
Dad, we're litigators. Let's stick to helping people in the courtroom.
Well, can we still hang out and jam a little bit?
At Meldon Law, we won't back down.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to MotivationU, the podcast here from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast Room at Celebration Point. My name is Bob Ganzak, speaking with Mr. Bill Barnett today, good friend of mine, a wonderful human being, somebody I love to talk racing with, although our ladies don't like us talking racing all the time when we're together with them. But
they view it as an argument.
They view it as an argument. It's just a difference in opinions. I would be different now after
I finally taught you.
2,100 days of meditation since that time. I now look at things a little bit differently, all right? But Bill has an incredible career of things that have happened. We were talking about Pete and his leadership mentor style that he taught you early on.
Right.
Let's catch with that, and then I want to jump into some of the great experiences you've had as a business owner.
Sure. Well, Pete, because I want to give him that credit, right? Pete had the gift of being able to, like I said, I color out the lines a lot, right? Yep. And in the financial world, you can't really color out the lines, right? I mean, there's times you can approach things out of the line, but you can't not the
once you get inside,
right? Yeah. Got to stay there, right? The regulations make you stay there. And early in my career, I was 21, 22 years old, right? You know, I didn't understand that, right? So Pete would, on a kind of a routine basis, have to remind me of that, right? Mm-hmm. And Pete had the ability to be able to give you an unbelievable butt chewing, right? Where you understood you were chewed out. There wasn't any doubt about the fact, none, that you really had been whacked pretty darn good. But you really wanted to do it again, right? Because he understood how to take that and make sure that what came from that was not, you weren't defeated in the process of it. That he was able to get his point across very strongly, but at the same time leave you with the understanding that that all this was a lesson, and we were going to move forward in a bigger way. And every one of the butt chewings that I had, which was more than one in the early parts of my career, learning the perimeters, right? I left motivated.
That's good.
And so I understood as I began to kind of work with people, right, and begin in my own leadership career, how I tried to be very conscientious about that, right? Because I knew how it felt, right? And I'd much rather leave somebody feeling
and the
good about what they learned, right?
And doing it sincerely. I mean,
yeah.
We've both been to seminars where we've heard these ridiculous things being said about, you got to put the sandwich together, You start with a nice thing, give them the ugly meat in the middle, and then give them the nice bun at the end and
right
out the door. That's manipulation.
That's exactly what it is.
And that has nothing to do with leadership.
No.
It has everything to do with narcissism and arrogance. And
they have to be motivated to learn from what it was, realize that you were not degrading them, that you were doing your best to help them recognize how not to repeat a mistake that they made.
Yep.
And
make
therein
the
lies
fault
the
easy to
difference.
correct, going back to Mr. Carnegie.
Yes, that's correct. Right. And they usually are.
Yeah. And praising every improvement.
Yep.
When you do, they're going to criticize you. They're going to call you out when you make a mistake. Yet when you have growth, they're going to applaud that also.
Right, absolutely.
That's amazing. So how did you get to Jacksonville, Florida?
Right. Like I mentioned, I lived in Virginia Beach. After I was in D.C. and started my business with that, I had an opportunity to have a little ownership of something in Virginia Beach, so I went there. And as I was building that, I kind of got recognized by a person he was the first person that I knew that made $1 million a year, $1 million a year, and again, that was in 1982, right? Wow. And so he was the guy in our world, right, with our company thing. And I didn't even know he knew my name, right? And he called me and wanted me to come to San Diego and take a look at, because he owned the rights to that area and he had not had success. And so we looked, and at the end of about a 4-day thing there, he offered me a partnership that I would get out of the one I had in Virginia Beach and have a bigger opportunity with him. And I did that, right? So San Diego. So I ended up buying him out. We made it, I built a pretty big organization there. And I sold it to the parent company at some point. And then I had been in Jacksonville developing in that same firm. I'd bought the rights to Jacksonville, but I was living in San Diego and just kind of back and forth. And in San Diego just got too big, right? And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And so that was how I ended up in Jacksonville.
Just run it yourself, come in there and make it happen.
Yeah, right. And then did the same thing, right? And built with 20 at one point.
What company was that?
Academy Insurance Group, right?
Academy
Is the name of that, right? Yeah. And I did that for 22 years. And when I left, there were 12 of us that actually owned the company, the whole parent company. And we had 165 offices around the world. We had them in Germany and England and Korea and all over the United States, Japan. And I owned 22 of them directly. And I had a management company that owned 40 more that I ran for 40 other owners. So we had about a third of the company, give or take, I had some control of. Plus, I owned 12th of the parent company.
Who bought out Academy?
A company called Providian, which is now owned by Aegon, right? AEGON, right? Which is a big investment bank.
So investment is a intelligent world to get involved in. I mean, it's a smart thing to do, especially with your personality and your attention to detail and the things that you love to do. The restaurant business?
Yeah, well, after I sold the financial, well, it's funny because after being in the financial business for 22 years, right?
A seafood restaurant.
I just was like, I want to do something different. And I'd invest in a few other little things along the way with somebody to kind of get, other kinds of things, right? But when I sold all that, and actually the way I ended up doing it, I didn't set out, Bob, to go buy the seafood thing, right? I mean, I was married at the time, and my wife sent me up to buy 5 pounds of shrimp, right? And I was on my bicycle, right? And I rode my bicycle up. And this place was one step from it was like a really nice bait shop, right? And they sold shrimp and fish out of the garage doors and their thing. The pumps had been taken out. It was an old gas station.
Some people were putting them on hooks and some people were eating them.
That's exactly, right? And it was pretty much how it worked. And so I went up to buy that, and the guy that owned it, who I'd been, we'd done business with him or whatever. And anyway, one thing led to another in a discussion that day. And so we made a deal and I bought it, right? So I bought that and the property around it or whatever. And so when I got home, it was about 5 hours later. Actually, we made the deal on the fish paper. Right?
So I'm riding my bike up to get 5 pounds of shrimp.
Yes.
All right. And I come home with the store and land.
And when I said to my wife, she was like, "Where have you been?" Right? Because I was never really take my phone, even back then, right? We had cell phones, but I kind of left it home most of the time. And so it wasn't really working then, right? I hadn't worked in a while. And she was like, "Where have you been?" Right? I was getting a big butt chilling for having been gone 5 hours. And she said, "Did you get that shrimp?" And I looked at her. I said, "As a matter of fact, I did." I said, "I bought all he had." And she said, "What?" And I said, "I bought all the shrimp he had, all the sizes, and I bought the crab legs, and I bought all the fish." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "We now own Frank's Fresh Seafood," right? She's like, "What are you doing?" And I explained to her, and we were having some people over for dinner. She was like, "You got to be kidding me, right? We can't talk about it right now because everybody's going to be here." So then the next day, I explained to her what I had done, and so that was how we acquired that. Right?
Did it still have the same steps?
Oh no, it had none of that. It was a gas station. Yeah, it was a gas. You could look at it even today. If you stand across the street, and you kind of imagine an old shell gas station, the old type. You can see it, right? It was 2 garage doors and a little place, where you walked in to pay for your gas and 2 pumps out front, kind of thing. Yeah. And so that's what it was, except the pumps weren't there. The island was there, but not the pumps. And
so that's 3rd Street?
3rd Street, right. It's right on 3rd Street at Beach Boulevard.
So if you're ever going through Jacksonville Beach and you're going south on 3rd Street, It'll be on your right-hand side.
So yeah, it's
Across the
beachside
street.
seafood, right? It's
Yeah.
beachside seafood and sandwich company, actually, is what we called it. And so we rehabbed it, put the restaurant in, still did the fresh seafood, built the deck, so it's got all that, and built it into a pretty big restaurant, actually, right? And seafood market and some wholesale and all that.
It's nice to see that they're still.
Yeah, right. I sold it 13 years ago. I had it 11 years, right, and sold it 13 years ago. And one of the two owners still have that. The one bought the other one out, and but they've pretty much kept it the same overall.
So what was going from clothing to insurance and financial world, restaurant? What were some of the principles that you carried over,
right,
to be able to run a successful business for 11 years?
Well, it's safe to say I never cut fish, so I have no idea how that worked either, right? And it's, I think, the basic understanding that there are people who want to do a particular job, right? If it's in the financial world, they want to meet with a client, handle everything one-on-one, right? My job was to give them the opportunity to do that, meaning the facility itself and everything that comes behind it and all the administrative side and all that, for them to be able to perform their task, right? So it didn't really make any difference, and to this day I don't think it doesn't make any difference what the product is, right? Mm-hmm. If it's matching, again, where the empathy comes in, being empathetic, so it's matching the person with the task, right? And if you assign the wrong person to the wrong task, then the whole thing is not going to work. And so, there are people that really want to be fish cutters, right? And they're awesome at it, and they like their little world, and they stay in it. And that's what you let them do, and you give them a great facility, and you build enough customers around it to keep them busy, and you can pay them what that's worth, right? And they're happy. And if it's the cook in the kitchen or if the person in the front that's running it, so I don't think that the business itself doesn't make a difference. It's understanding that there are people that want certain tasks. Sometimes they don't want to grow past that task, right? And you have to be comfortable in allowing them to be that. The military used to have career sergeants, right? They never got above an E5, but they could stay 30 years as an E5 because they were a great mechanic, right? They don't do that today, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't move through the ranks at a certain point, they don't let you stay. And one of the problems with that is that they're always trying to replace the experience, right? So it's a little bit of a snag, right? And that's what happens, I think, in a lot of businesses. They move people and try to promote them when they shouldn't be.
Square peg, round hole.
Right.
There's two things that come to my mind. One is going back to talking about Laura when you were talking about her Wells Fargo days. When the person doesn't see in themselves the ability to do something that they never dreamed they can do, or have shown no interest in wanting to do,
right?
How do you convince that person? That's one side. Now here's the other side. How about the person that wants to be the round hole but is a square peg?
Right. Well, that person you have to allow them to fail. Okay. Right? The one that wants to do a task that they are not suited for, you have to have, but they're good people, right? That's the key. Mm-hmm. Now, if they're a jerk, then it's just your opportunity to get rid of them, okay? But if they're good people that you really want on your team, but they really want to do something different, you have to have the patience for their failure. Mm-hmm. And you have to put them in a position, give them everything you would anybody else, and allow them to understand that it's not a task that they actually can, in fact, do efficiently. And
at this point, you might gain the knowledge to get to it down the road.
Right, maybe.
Right now they can't.
But you give them the opportunity, and you let them get a feel for the fact that it's a lot different or more difficult than they, in fact, actually thought it was. And when that happens, they will look you in the eye at some point and say, you know what? I probably shouldn't be here. Now, you got to keep encouraging them anywhere along the line. It's like, listen, when this gets uncomfortable, understand there's a place for you. If this doesn't fit, don't feel like this is the end of the line for you. I have other things that I think that I believe you might be a little better suited for. So, when you're ready, if this doesn't fit, I really want you to be a part of the team. We will figure that out, right? So that the security is there. They have to know that they're not going to get fired or let go or whatever term you want to use for, a failure in a task, right? They have to have room to fail. On the other side of it is when you see something in somebody that they don't see, then the encouragement to have them partner with somebody who does it well, and give them teeny bites of whatever it is, the small bites. And when they take those small bites and they begin to realize this is something, maybe this is something that I would like, right? So what I try to do is to go to them and say, do you trust me, right? Mm-hmm. And if you trust me, you have to allow me the opportunity to give you this opportunity. And I know you don't think that this is going to be comfortable for you or something you're going to be good at, and I understand that. But I see something in you that I might be wrong, but if I'm right, then you're going to move in a different direction. And I think you would prefer the direction. And so let's do this in small little pieces, right? And so that's what I try to do, is to give them those bites. And then if it fits, they start feeling comfortable, and they'll react pretty positively to that in pretty much all cases.
I think my biggest frustration in what I've done over my career is those individuals that they have it, and they're not willing to try.
Very frustrating.
And they're not even willing to look at it.
Right.
I think of a couple of people, I won't mention their names right now, that just absolutely could be, succeeding.
Sure.
But I don't even tie it always to money.
No,
I very rarely tie it to money.
No.
I do tie it to the impact they can make on people's lives and their own.
That's the key.
But and I've said this many times lately, that 6 inches of real estate between our ears is probably the toughest piece of real estate to get a hold of nowadays. So then you go to you sell out of that, or did they overlap the Alhambra?
No, actually, what I do now, right, through the World Financial Group, right. So what I do now, I had started and had a few years into when I sold Beachside, and then that became about a year later, maybe after I sold Beachside, is when the opportunity came up to buy the Alhambra. And so that's been all during the time that my financial career is back on track, right? So the Alhambra's always been a piece of that. And we recently bought another business actually through that, and a food distribution business in St. Augustine.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll have to learn about that. Maybe we after the podcast,
we can go have food.
Yeah. So tell me, is World Financial Group a franchise? Because yours is one of the largest.
Yeah, it's
networks.
actually the largest distribution of insurance-based financial products, and then it's owned by Transamerica, right? So Transamerica owns the agency. World Financial Group is an agency, basically.
Okay.
Right? It just is really big, right? And but then Transamerica also owns Transamerica Financial Advisors, which is where the investment part of everything that we do, and investment advisory and all that. So the parent company is Transamerica. And so what they do is they allow someone the opportunity to qualify for the ownership, brokerage side or whatever, right? And so there's a set of hoops and you have to jump through, right? And if you can meet that, then they give you the opportunity to have part of that, to have and run your own, right, on whatever area. So that's what I have.
And yours is the Jacksonville. How
it's not geographical, actually. It's like I could have 20 others in Jacksonville, right? So it just doesn't, it's not just me. I happen to have by far and away the biggest one in there, right? But there are a few other, that other people that have qualified and that are not part of my organization. It just happens to be that mine's pretty big, right?
So you could have other people doing the same thing down the street from you.
Yeah, like in my case, I have people on my team that have kind of worked through me and then started with me, did what they did, qualified for the ownership, right? And one of those is in Macon, one of those is in the New Orleans area, another one in Atlanta, and a few other parts of the country, right? And so they're entrepreneurial people that have recognized this as a good financial opportunity, and they've been able to qualify for the ownership part. And then what Transamerica does is through WFG and all the other stuff, right? Is for me having developed them, then they do a profit sharing, right? Okay. So it's given me an opportunity to have some profit sharing on having developed other leaders and other business owners, right?
That's an awesome.
So it's not like a multi-level marketing thing. It's not like that, but it's a little page out of it, I guess. And it's like a paragraph out of the book. Yeah, right. But it's a good paragraph, right?
Yeah. It's been. I'm blessed that we've been able to interact with some of those successful people from your group as they've come through our classes.
Yeah, right.
Which is just wonderful to see, and to watch them go from, like, when they first come into your organization and they really don't know, it's almost like they got blinders in front of them.
Right.
They don't know what's on the other side of the door, and the way that you help them. And when they see the light and they keep on going and going and going, and then they finally decide that, oh, I can make this happen.
Yeah, this can actually be a business for me, not just something at the end of my toe.
Think about how many families you've impacted.
Well, that, it's funny, when I decided to come do this, that was the only reason that I did it. I'd had enough, financial success, right, that my motivation wasn't there, right? But I had turned 50. And I was trying to figure out what else I wanted to do.
2 years ago.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago. So I, in the process of trying to figure that out, right, I looked at a lot of different things. And when my exposure came to this, and I recognized that this would give me an opportunity to take everything that I'd learned professionally and that I'd had success with, and be able to potentially duplicate that to people that I could mentor, the way bringing all the mentors I had through the years into them, right? And to be able to channel that to somebody else and give them all that knowledge along with all the other mentors that they would have, then it could lead to that. And then especially one of the reasons I like it in the financial business is because, there are, you get somebody that, we had a claim, as if, for instance, from the insurance side of our business, where somebody got hit on a Buckman Bridge, right, and went over, and he was married and a couple kids and all those sort of things, and they had met with one of our folks a year or so earlier. Everything was organized. So while that family suffered emotionally, what they did not do was suffer financially, right? So they were allowed to grieve the way you should grieve, but without financial stress, right? And I never met them. I mean, I have no idea who these people were, right? But it was just something a decision that I made those years ago, and then have helped other people learn how to do, ultimately helped that family that probably would not have been in the same situation if it weren't for the risk that I took, so to speak, in the beginning, right? And that was what I wanted. So now, because we've got, I have approaching 200 people now, right? I'll never even come close to meeting the people that we have. Some, like through all of some of those financial up and down times with the markets and COVID or whatever, and people that, we had been able to set up the proper kind of retirement programs, and now they had access to cash when they needed it, right? And coming out of that on the investment side of our business, right? That's a real good feeling to know that, those folks have done that. Or the other side, when somebody's done really well. Yesterday, somebody that I had met with a client 12 or 14 years ago, teaching one of my other folks, that person now has now left the company they were with, built a big business, and yesterday was able to set up 401ks for their entire program and all that kind of stuff. That all started with a life insurance policy 14 years ago when he worked for somebody else. Now he's built this pretty good sized company and a lot of cash flow and awesome. That sort of thing. So yeah, it's great to be able to do that. There's legacies, there's certain business legacies that you can leave. This one fits my personality to leave that legacy.
I appreciate you spending some time with us. I hope sometime we have you back, because there's a whole nother avenue of Bill that we never even touched into, which is the love of racing and of a lot of other things that have gone on in your life, which I really want.
Owning a race team's a fun, expensive sport.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention the ownership, but we will go into that at some time. Appreciate everybody. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill here inside the Coach's Podcast Room. His name is Bill Barnett, World Financial Group. Where can they find you, Bill? On an email
LinkedIn's probably the easiest.
LinkedIn?
Right? Yeah.
Look him up on LinkedIn. And you can find us at jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com. See you next week. This is Motivation U, the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Bob.